The world stopped for a moment. Time felt frozen when the news spread. Pope Francis has died. All around the world, people became quiet. In big cities and small villages, flags were lowered. Church bells rang, not in joy but in sadness. In that moment, people from different countries and beliefs came together. Everyone felt the loss of a man who cared for all. In Rome, where the Catholic Church is based, the streets near the Vatican grew quiet. Normally full of people, the area became still. In Africa, Latin America, Asia, and other parts of the world, people stopped what they were doing at work, at school, in the markets, to think about what this meant. Many people shared messages of love and respect. Presidents, pastors, priests, and regular people all sent kind words, but one message was different. It was a letter from the president of Burkina Faso, Ibrahim Traoré. He is a Muslim man, and his letter showed deep love and respect for the Pope. In this video, we will read the letter from President Traoré to Pope Francis. It is full of feeling and shows how much he cared for the Pope, not just as a leader, but as a friend. It also shows how many people around the world loved Pope Francis. This is not just the story of a Pope who died. It is the story of a kind man who gave hope to the world. A man who showed love, peace, and humility to everyone. The silence around the world wasn't just quiet. It was like a prayer. Absolutely. Among the many voices that spoke after the passing of Pope Francis, one stood out, coming from the heart of West Africa. It was a letter written not by a cardinal or a bishop, but by a Muslim president. His name is Ibrahim Traoré, the leader of Burkina Faso. His message was not filled with big or complicated words. It was honest. It was full of feeling. It came straight from the heart. In his letter, President Traoré said something powerful. He said, "The world has lost more than a pope. We have lost a man who loved all people, no matter where they came from or what they believed." He called Pope Francis a man of peace, a voice for the poor, a friend to the forgotten. He said that even though he followed a different faith, he always saw something special in the Pope: kindness, courage, and truth. And then he shared something personal. President Traoré remembered the day he met Pope Francis. Just once, a short meeting, but it stayed with him forever. He said, "That day the Pope looked at me not like a politician, but like a brother. He spoke to me with love, with honesty, with respect." That moment changed him. It reminded him that true leadership is not about power. It is about service, about standing up for those who have no voice. And he thanked the Pope for showing the world what that kind of leadership looks like. This letter shows something beautiful. Pope Francis was not just the leader of the Catholic Church. He was a light in a dark world, a bridge between different people, a reminder that love has no border. Even after his death, he is still bringing people together. A Christian Pope, a Muslim president. Different faith, but the same heart. The Pope's legacy is not written only in books or history. It lives on in people like President Traoré. It lives in every soul who chooses peace instead of hate, kindness instead of pride, unity instead of division. As the world says goodbye to Pope Francis, President Traoré's letter reminds us all: love speaks many languages, hope wears many faces, and sometimes the strongest faith is shown in simple, sincere words. In his letter, President Traoré also spoke not just of loss, but of profound gratitude. He thanked the Pope for his unwavering dedication to peace, his deep care for the poor, and his fearless stand for justice. The words weren't simply formal expressions of condolence. They were words of admiration and reverence for a leader who had made a lasting difference in the world. Traoré wrote, "Pope Francis has left behind a legacy of love, unity, and compassion that transcends borders. It is a gift to the world, and for that we are forever grateful." The president's sorrow was clear, but so was his hope. Even in grief, there was recognition that the Pope's message of mercy and peace would continue to live on in the hearts of people everywhere, long after his physical presence had gone. Pope Francis was more than a pope. He was a global figure whose impact extended far beyond the walls of the Vatican. His voice echoed in every corner of the world, from the slums of Latin America to the crowded streets of Africa. He spoke not only to Catholics, but to anyone who believed in human dignity, in justice, in mercy. President Traoré's letter reflected this universal reach. The words he penned were not just personal to him, they were shared by countless others, who saw in Pope Francis a champion for the marginalized, a defender of the oppressed, and a tireless advocate for peace in the face of division. In his tribute, President Traoré acknowledged the Pope's efforts to build bridges between cultures, religions, and nations. His leadership was not confined to a single community or continent. It was global. Pope Francis, Traoré wrote, reminded us all that we are part of a larger family, a family united by love, respect, and the desire for a better world. In a time of growing division and conflict, Pope Francis' leadership was a light that guided humanity through darkness. His influence was a reminder that even in our differences, we share a common humanity. It is a lesson that will continue to echo for generations to come. What makes this letter even more powerful is the relationship it speaks to, a relationship built not on shared faith or doctrine, but on mutual respect, love, and understanding. As the world mourns the loss of Pope Francis, President Traoré's words remind us that his legacy will never fade. The impact he had was not just on the Catholic Church, but on the entire world. He was a symbol of humility, of love, and of unwavering dedication to a world that too often chooses division over unity. In a world that sometimes feels torn apart by hatred, greed, and fear, Pope Francis showed us that there is another way. His leadership was one of peace, of selflessness, and of service to the least of these. And while his physical presence may no longer walk among us, the light he sparked in the hearts of so many continues to burn brightly. President Traoré's tribute is a reminder that though the Pope may be gone, his message will live on. His words, his actions, and his legacy will continue to inspire us all, regardless of our faith, our race, or our background. In closing, President Traoré wrote, "May the memory of Pope Francis guide us in our efforts to build a world where love, peace, and respect for all reign supreme." And with that, we are reminded that the Pope's work is not finished. It is now up to each of us to carry the torch he has passed on, and to continue building a better world, one act of kindness, one moment of love, at a time. The world had held its breath as the Vatican made its official announcement. The beloved Pope Francis had passed away. It wasn't just a statement from the Church, it was a moment that had defined an era. For decades, Pope Francis had been the heart and soul of the Catholic Church, but his passing marked the end of an unforgettable chapter in the history of the Vatican and the world. As the news had spread, a wave of grief swept through the faithful and non-faithful alike. People everywhere had begun to gather, from the streets of Rome to the remote corners of the globe. In every corner of the earth, his passing had been mourned with deep reverence. The Vatican's announcement hadn't just marked the loss of a pope. It had been a reminder of the extraordinary impact he had made, not only as a spiritual leader, but as a moral compass for the entire world. In the wake of the news, Cardinal Giovanni Battista Re, the Vatican's spokesperson, had addressed the faithful with a statement that resonated far beyond the walls of St. Peter's. He had spoken not just of the Pope's death, but of his life, the love he had spread, the bridges he had built, and the truth he had shared. Pope Francis was a shepherd, a guide for us all. Cardinal Re had said, his voice steady but filled with the weight of the moment. He led us with humility, with courage, and with unwavering love for humanity. Today we grieve his passing, but we also celebrate his life, a life that has forever changed the world. Cardinal Re's words had echoed through the Basilica, but they had also reverberated in hearts across the world. In that moment of profound loss, his statement had captured the essence of Pope Francis's legacy, one of humility, compassion, and universal love. The Cardinal had spoken of the Pope's dedication to the poor, his tireless efforts for peace, and his unwavering commitment to unity. As a leader, Pope Francis had been a bridge between religions, between peoples, between nations. And in that moment, Cardinal Ree's statement had reminded everyone that the Pope's work had not been just within the walls of the Church, it had been for the entire human family. As the news had settled in, spontaneous moments of silence had broken out all over the world. In cities large and small, people had stopped what they were doing, whether they had been in busy markets, crowded office buildings, or quiet parks, to pay their respects. In these shared silences, a collective grief had been felt, not just by those who had followed the Pope's faith, but by all who had been touched by his message of peace. But the silence had not been just about mourning. It had been about gratitude, a gratitude that had extended far beyond the Church and had touched people of all faiths, backgrounds, and cultures. It had been in these moments of silence that the true weight of his passing had been felt, a sense of loss, yes, but also a recognition of the extraordinary gift Pope Francis had given to the world. And then, as if by some divine signal, moments of spontaneous applause had erupted in various places around the world. These had not been celebratory cheers, but a tribute, a standing ovation for a man whose life had been a testament to service, to compassion, and to love. In the face of loss, people had come together, clapping in unison as a final gesture of appreciation for all the Pope had done. It hadn't just been the Vatican that had recognized Pope Francis's greatness, it had been the entire world. And as applause had rung out, it had been a powerful reminder that his legacy would continue to echo for generations to come. A legacy built on compassion, humility, and an unwavering commitment to a world united by love. When the news of Pope Francis's passing had spread, it had sent shockwaves across the globe, triggering an outpouring of grief and admiration. His influence had been undeniable, and the world had mourned, not just the loss of a religious leader, but of a figure who had touched hearts far beyond the walls of the Vatican. Africa, a continent deeply intertwined with Pope Francis's legacy, had mourned his passing in its own unique way. Over the years, Pope Francis had traveled to many African nations, spreading messages of peace, unity, and solidarity with the poor and marginalized. His compassion for the continent had resonated deeply with its people, and his death had been felt as a personal loss. Burkina Faso, despite being a Muslim-majority nation, President Ibrahim Traoré had spoken of the personal connection he had felt with the Pope, describing him as a man who had bridged the gap between faiths and brought people together. In his letter, the president had expressed how the Pope's leadership had inspired him, and how the Pope's efforts to advocate for the oppressed had resonated with the struggles of the people of Burkina Faso. President Traoré's words had captured the sentiment of many in the region. His tribute had been one of profound respect, admiration, and gratitude. It was a recognition that Pope Francis's impact had not been limited to the Church, but had extended to the hearts and minds of people from all walks of life, transcending religious and national boundaries. In Burkina Faso, where faith, unity, and resilience are deeply embedded in the culture, the passing of Pope Francis had sparked not only mourning but reflection. Many had paused to consider the Pope's calls for peace, justice, and love, values that resonated deeply with the Burkinabe. The Pope's legacy, particularly in promoting interfaith dialogue, had been a guiding light for those striving for harmony in a world that often seemed divided. Pope Francis had always been more than just the head of the Catholic Church. He had been a voice for the voiceless, a beacon of hope in times of despair, and a tireless advocate for peace. His leadership had transcended religious boundaries, and his calls for justice and compassion had resonated with millions around the world, regardless of their faith. In Africa, Pope Francis's legacy was particularly profound. He had traveled to numerous countries across the continent, where his words and actions had bridged divides and inspired hope. From the very beginning of his papacy, Pope Francis had made it clear that his heart was with the poor and marginalized, and nowhere was this more evident than in his visits to African nations that had suffered from conflict, poverty, and disease. In his speeches and actions, the Pope had called for unity, reconciliation, and peace in Africa, emphasizing the importance of dialogue between different faiths and cultures. He had urged African nations to set aside their differences and work together toward a future of peace and mutual respect. His message had been one of healing and solidarity, a reminder that the true power of a nation lay in its ability to love and support one another. Pope Francis had been particularly committed to visiting conflict zones in Africa, where his presence had been a symbol of hope and strength. Whether it was the Democratic Republic of Congo, South Sudan, or Central African Republic, the Pope had traveled to places where violence and war had torn apart communities. He had met with political leaders, religious figures, and local citizens, offering prayers for peace and emphasizing the need for dialogue over conflict. His visits had been more than just symbolic. Pope Francis had used these moments to challenge world leaders and local authorities to do more for the peace and well-being of their people. His message was clear. Peace was not just the absence of war, but the presence of justice, compassion, and understanding. In places where violence had devastated communities, Pope Francis had spoken words of healing. He had called for forgiveness and reconciliation, not just between nations, but also between individuals and groups within nations. His messages had been filled with urgency, but also with hope, a hope that peace could still be achieved, no matter how dire the situation seemed. As the news of Pope Francis's passing had spread, tributes had poured in from every corner of the world. From the Vatican itself to distant corners of the globe, people had remembered him not just for his role as a religious leader, but for his tireless work for peace and justice. Countries in Africa, Latin America, and beyond had sent their condolences, honoring the Pope for his commitment to peace and unity. Leaders had praised his ability to connect with people of all faiths, his unwavering support for the marginalized, and his powerful advocacy for social justice. In many African nations, where Pope Francis's influence had been felt deeply, leaders had recognized the Pope's contributions to fostering interfaith dialogue and supporting efforts to end violence. His legacy, they said, would live on in the countless lives he had touched through his efforts for peace. From Europe to the Americas, tributes had acknowledged Pope Francis's profound impact on global diplomacy. His efforts to mediate conflicts, his advocacy for environmental sustainability, and his calls for the protection of refugees and migrants had earned him respect not just from Catholics, but from people of all religions and backgrounds. The Vatican's account of Pope Francis's final hours was one of quiet reflection and peace. As Easter Sunday dawned, the Pope, though frail, had given his final blessing to the world, symbolizing the hope and faith he had embodied throughout his life. His words, filled with warmth and compassion, resonated deeply with those around him, a fitting end to a lifetime of service. In his last moments, the Pope was surrounded by close aides and members of the clergy. The ritual of certifying his death was carried out with solemnity and reverence, marking the end of an era. As the news spread, the world paused, acknowledging the passing of a man whose legacy would endure far beyond his earthly departure. As the world mourned, the Vatican began making plans for the future. The College of Cardinals, a group of senior church leaders, gathered to choose a new pope. It was an important task, as they needed to find someone who could continue Pope Francis's message of kindness and peace. Plans for the Pope's funeral were also put in place. It would be a meaningful event to honor his life and work. The conclave, where the cardinals would meet to elect the next pope, was ready to begin, with hopes of finding a leader to guide the church in the future. During the funeral, certain traditions would be followed to show respect for the Pope's life and mark the start of a new chapter for the Church. Pope Francis will always be remembered for his compassion, humility, and efforts to bring the world together. He showed us that love, peace, and understanding can transcend borders and beliefs. His legacy continues to inspire millions around the world, encouraging us all to care for each other, regardless of our differences. The world's outpouring of grief and tributes is a testament to the deep impact he had on lives across continents. From the smallest villages to the grandest cities, Pope Francis's message of hope will live on in our heart. As we remember his life and work, let us carry his message forward in our own lives. If you found this tribute meaningful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. Share your reflections and join the conversation.